Hello and welcome back to our course on Excel 2013. In this section we're going to look at managing worksheets, and we're going to start using our table of expenses, which is a single worksheet in an Excel 2013 workbook. And what we're going to do is to change this workbook so that it has multiple worksheets. Now, before we start, I'd like to point out something about working in Excel 2013 that you will have realized already, and that is that there's usually more than one way of doing things. If, for instance, you wanted to format a cell, you will have seen that you've got things like the contextual menu, you've got the mini toolbar, you've maybe got 2 or 3 options on one or more tabs of the ribbon to achieve the effect that you want. And so far as we've been going through the course, I've pointed out 1 or 2, sometimes 3 ways of doing something, but there are usually others as well. You may also have noticed that as far as the ribbon's concerned, we've only looked at a couple of the tabs on it, and the majority of the tabs on it we haven't even opened and looked at yet, although we will be looking at all of them during the rest of the course. Now, in talking about managing worksheets, it's another good example of how we can use one approach to getting at the commands that we need, but there are many others, and not all of them we'll be covering in the course. Some of them you'll perhaps stumble across yourself later, or you may look for a better approach, or you may speak to somebody else and they may tell you that there is a different or sometimes better way of doing things. The important point is, if you experiment with these, you'll usually find the way that suits you the best. And the way that I've shown you to do things on this course so far is often the best way, but more often it's the way that I think for people who are new to Excel, it's the easiest way to follow. There are various shortcuts and workarounds and so on that I use in my day-to-day use of Excel that I haven't covered here, because they'd perhaps be a bit confusing if you're still new to Excel and you're just trying to get your head around exactly what it does and how it works, etc. Now, as the course progresses, I will try to introduce a few of those little shortcuts, a few of those little tricky ways of doing things that you may find save you time or make things easier in the long run. So, somewhat in that spirit, let's look at this workbook, which has a single sheet in it. The single sheet contains some of Toby A's expenses on a business trip. What are we going to do with this workbook is we're going to make it a sort of workbook with a number of employees' expenses in it. And initially it's only going to have 2 employees' expenses, but it's also going to have an information sheet at the back. So we're going to finish up with 3 worksheets in this workbook. We're going to finish up with a worksheet for Toby A, a worksheet for Simone C, and then a sort of key at the back, and the key will contain things like the list of available categories: travel, entertainment, subsistence, office. Now, in order to do that, what we're going to do is to use one specific approach, and that is we're going to look at the tab at the bottom of the current worksheet and right click and use that contextual menu. So let's look at the items on the contextual menu. We have Insert, which enables us to insert a new sheet. We have Delete, which enables us to delete the selected sheet. Rename, which, as the name implies, enables you to rename a sheet. Move or Copy, which enables us to move or copy the selected sheet. We can move it either to another position in the current workbook, or in fact can move it to another workbook. As we'll see later on in the course, it's quite possible to have 2 or more workbooks open, and in that case you can move worksheets between workbooks. You can also make a copy either to another position in this workbook or to another open workbook. View Code enables you to look at the VBA code, the program code that you can attach to a worksheet. Now, we don't cover coding in this basic course, but with coding you can put together very specific and very individual behavior for your workbook and your worksheets. Protect Sheet we will look at later on in the course. This is a way of protecting your sheet so that you can either stop people from changing it, or even in some cases stop people from seeing your sheet. Tab color enables you to change the color of the worksheet tab itself. I'll show you that in a moment. Hide, well, I think you can probably guess what hide does. That enables you to hide a sheet. And select all sheets enables you to select all sheets in the workbook. So let's try one or two of those out. Let's start by renaming the sheet. So right click, click on rename, and what you'll see is that the current name, sheet 1, is highlighted, and you should just about be able to see that there is a cursor flashing to the right of sheet 1, and that indicates where we will type if we start typing. Now I want to delete the whole of the current name, so all I need to do as the current name is selected is to press any character on the keyboard, either the real keyboard or my virtual keyboard. What's there is deleted. Put in the name that I want. I'm going to make it Toby A. Press enter and my sheet has been renamed. Okay, now I'm going to make a copy of that sheet for the second employee, Simone C. So right click on the tab, click on move or copy, and it brings up this little move or copy dialog. Now the move or copy dialog has effectively three things where you have to make a decision. First of all, which book? Now if you've only got one workbook open, then you'll only be able to copy it into that one workbook, but you can say new book. A new book will open a new book for you and put either this sheet or a copy of this sheet into a new book. So that's a pretty useful option. I'm going to stick with the current book, which is called Book 5D. Then I say, where do I want it? Do I want it before sheet Toby A, or do I want it at the end, move to end? Now I'm going to put this at the end. And the third option is, and this is what differentiate a move from a copy, is do I want to move it or do I want to copy it? Now in this case I want a copy, so I'm going to click on copy, click on OK, and I've now got a second sheet. Now notice the name of the worksheet. The name of the worksheet is Toby A with a 2 in brackets. I'm going to change the name, so I'm going to do right click, rename, type as before, Simone C, press enter, and I've got my second worksheet. Now one of the things about doing this with a copy is that when I make a copy of a worksheet I get all of the content as well. So by copying the Toby A sheet, I'm renaming it Simone C. The rename doesn't affect the content of the sheet, so I've still got all of Toby's expenses. So let's suppose I now want to set this up for Simone. I'm going to click into cell A1, which is the header. In the formula bar it says expenses Toby A. If I click in the formula bar, delete the name and instead put in the name Simone C, then I'm now starting to personalize this sheet to my second employee. Now the other thing to note is that the expenses that currently are in here for Toby will clearly not be the same expenses as for Simone. So what I'm going to do now is to clear the contents of all of these expenses, but I'm going to do this using touch. So if I were going to clear all of those expense entries using keyboard and mouse, I would select them all and press the delete key. The approach with touch is pretty similar. Tap on A3, ignore the mini toolbar for the moment, drag by the bottom right hand corner to make the selection complete. Now tap again within that area to bring up the mini toolbar, and then all you need to do is to tap on clear and it's all cleared. Now in fact the entry for Simone C would actually be a much better one for creating a further copy because we've cleared the expenses entries for Toby. So supposing I wanted to make a third employee sheet, so right click on Simone C, move or copy. Now I'm going to make a copy, so let's do that first. I'm going to stick in the same book. I'm going to move this copy before Toby A, so I'm going to click on OK. Look what happens. I get a further copy. Gets that default name of Simone C2. Of course, I could rename it. If I wanted to put these in a different order, I could use the move command to move them about. But there's a good alternative when you want to change the order, and that is that if you select one of the tabs, you can drag it into the position you want it. So for instance, I can move the tabs around, worksheets around like this. And finally on this, if I wanted to just get rid of one of these, remember I said at the beginning that I only wanted 2 employee tabs for their expenses. If I right click on Simone C2 and click on delete, I'm asked to confirm. You can't undo deleting sheets, so this is a very important confirmation. Click on delete and that one's gone. Now the third sheet that I want in this workbook is nothing like the other two. It's not an expenses sheet for a third employee. It's a sort of key. It's probably the key that I will let employees use to notify them of things like the categories of expense that are available. So there's really no benefit in making a copy of one of the existing worksheets to create the third one. So what I'm going to do is to insert a new worksheet. Now there are a couple of ways of doing this. In fact, there are more than 2 ways of doing it, but you may recall that if we right click on one of these tabs, we see insert, and if you click on insert, you see this insert dialog in which worksheet is already selected. Now you can insert several other things at this point. I'm not going to go into that now, but if worksheet is selected and you click on OK, you get a new worksheet, and it will be given a default name, which obviously then you can rename, and then you can put whatever information you want to put on this sheet. Now in this case, what I was going to use this sheet for is to make a list of the categories that are available. So I might say there, right, here are the categories. We know that one of them is entertainment, so I can put all of those in. I can select that column, auto fit column width, etc. Maybe make that heading bold, and I can put in all the available categories and say to the employees when they're filling in their sheets, use this key and make sure that you only ever include category entries from this list. Now one important thing to recognize here, although we won't be covering it on this course, is that you can actually automate this workbook using the sort of code that I mentioned a little while ago to say that when employees are, for instance, entering expenses, let's go back to Toby's sheet, when he's selecting a category here, you could actually offer him a list of the available categories and only let him choose from that list, and the list itself could be derived from the list on this key sheet here. So you can pretty much lock down the categories that the employees use, but that's beyond the scope of this course. Now one important thing to notice there as well is that when I did the insert, I actually right clicked on Simone C, and the insert, when you do that, will be to the left of the selected tab, so the selected existing worksheet. There's a little plus button just here to the right of the tabs, and this is a new worksheet button. Click on that and you get a new worksheet again to the left of the selected tab. So that's another way of doing exactly the same thing. Now I don't need the second one, so I'm going to right click and delete it. I'm going to rename sheet 1 and call it key. Press enter. And for Toby A, right click, tab color, I'm going to choose a theme color. I'm going to choose that theme color. Simone C, again tab color, same theme color for Simone C. Key, tab color, let's choose that tab color for the key. I'm going to drag the key to be right at the end, and there I've got slightly more nicely formatted tabs for the worksheets in my workbook. And of course, as you'll realize by now, if I change the theme, so if I go up to page layout, themes, watch the tabs. As I change theme, the tabs will change with the theme as well. So that is it on managing worksheets at the moment, and we're going to be doing quite a lot in the rest of the course. I'll see you in the next section.